Yes. It seems incomprehensible that we started this the first week of September, I believe. And now we're in the last week of the year, as well as the last week of the month, the last Friday of the year, the last Friday of the month. And we've watched a lot of football being played. And we now know more than we did when we started this journey. I think we've seen a lot of people's assumptions about certain programs be either confirmed or destroyed. Obviously, a lot of players have changed location since the season began, and more are still changing as the days pass and guys are declaring, and some guys who we thought would declare have not declared. But tell me, when you look back on the year that was 2022 in college football, what are some of the things that will stick with you?
This year has produced many highs and lows, many hoorays and tears. Um, the thing that will stick out to me the most was the emergence of teams I did not expect to be as good as they were. Now, two of them are in the college football playoff. Michigan being able to return was a big shocker. The bigger one was TCU. I had a good feeling about the Horned Frogs. I had them about 8 to 9 wins coming into the season. But wow, did they absolutely run the gauntlet in the regular season under Coach Sonny Dykes. What he's done with that offense and turning Max Duggan and just the rest of that football team into an offensive juggernaut has just been incredibly impressive. For as much as I criticize the man, I got to give my flowers to Brian Kelly. What he's done at LSU so quickly is just phenomenal. Max Taylor is going to be an absolute stud in the future. Talk about genetics, right? Your dad is Jason Taylor. Your uncle's Zach Thomas. Like you really couldn't hit the lottery any much more better than that. And the last thing I want to probably before we jump into everything else is this wide receiver class. I did not have that high of expectations for, and a lot of these players have blown me away. The guys that are going to be in the first round, Jalen Hyatt, Quentin Johnston, guys of that nature, just completely, just kind of came out of nowhere for me personally. And just congratulations to those young men. And I'm really looking forward to see how where they go in the NFL draft.
Well, that is where we are next, right? The next big thing for us who are football aficionados, junkies, pick a term, is the draft. And of course, the draft is my favorite thing in the world. I mean, I love you, Avery. My daughter is right there, but right next there, right in close proximity to my love for my daughter, who of course is my world, is the NFL draft. And I've known the draft longer, honey. So I've come to love you very much, but the draft has been a part of my life for a very long time. I wrote my first draft article quite literally 40 years ago, almost to the day, Brock, almost to the day. That's amazing and a little scary. So I am excited about this particular draft class, particularly at some of the positions. I think this corner class is fantastic. And one of my guys, Jacorian Bennett, showed up and showed out today. If you read my article on the cornerback class, I lavished my love and attention on Jacorian Bennett in that article, and I stand by it. I think he's going to be a terrific pro for 10 years. But I really like this running back class. I really like this wide receiver class. I really like this guard and center class. I'm on the tackles, offensive tackles at least.
Wow, you are a lot better than me. I am absolutely think this offensive tackle class is in the dumpster.
It's hard to find. There's guys going to go early though. There's going to be some tackles going to go early because of the desperation.
Yes.
Right. So It's a good year to be at a pretty good offensive tackle. You don't have to be great. Just be pretty darn good and test well. You will make way more money than you probably should.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The free agency class for the NFL, if we want to talk about that just briefly because we're a college football show, is going to be very interesting to see because of the lack of depth at the tackle position coming out of college. A great thing that we are going to see as well is this quarterback class, the same things that have happened to them. There's going to be some quarterbacks for which are going to be overvalued because, one, the lack of true depth in this class, and secondly, the need of the position, alongside the fact that for some reason we have put immense value on how you perform in the combine and on no contact drills than we do on watching actual game film. Don't ask me why executives do that. I don't do that personally, and that's the reason why Zach Wilson wasn't my number 2 quarterback overall during my 2021 quarterback evaluations. Not the point. This quarterback class, which we will dive into very soon, is going to be very interesting to dissect because there's some guys that are going to go higher than they should, and some really talented ball players that are going to go a lot lower than they should because of things that, quite frankly, don't make sense.
Well, the combine has tremendous value, actually, and it tells you, but most of what it tells you is what to avoid. And so it is a tremendous value in terms of negatives, right? What if you know that historically nobody who's ever had a vertical leap below such and such has ever had a career longer than this number of years in the history of football, you may not want to invest a high pick in a player who had a 23 and a half inch vertical, right? So there's things you can learn from the combine. The combine has tremendous value, but it shouldn't be the thing that makes your final decision on a player, at least not in isolation by itself. It should be, okay, if we were playing the draft show drinking game, which we are not, every time someone says it's a piece of the puzzle, you have to take a drink. But luckily, we're not playing that game yet.
Yes, that's the key word.
Right. Luckily, we're not. But I was a sort of old school, just watch the tape guy for a very long time because I'm old, Brock. But in the last few years, I've started really getting into the numbers and what they actually mean. Now, some people look at the wrong numbers, but that's a whole other show. Metrics are your friend. Analytics are your friend if you make them your friend. But you have to know the value and what things to value at what positions. And once again, that's a whole other show. But some things that you're testing are just a test of how well someone has practiced this particular drill. And how good their form is coming out of the blocks and things like that. I hear people saying, oh, I don't care about the 40. I want to look at the 10-yard. Well, the 10-yard is really just a test of who has the best form coming off the line. It's true because explosion is given to you by the vertical. If you're looking at 10-yard splits, why not just look at the vertical? And though you can gain a little bit in terms of form, explosion is hard to fake. You know what I mean? You and I could work on our form for years. When I was in the best shape of my life, I was a scrappy 34-inch vert. And of course, that was a very long time ago. And I was doing donkey calf raises. I could squat probably close to, well, maybe not 3 times, but more than 2.5 times my body weight. I was not a particularly, how do I put this? There were certain things I was good at, right? I could test well in certain areas, like vertical. That was like, hey, decent. Of course, I'm short. I had to work on that since I was trying to play defensive back. But now we've really gone off the rails. Let's get back on the rails. The All-American teams, of course, have come out. Everybody in the world nowadays has an All-American team. PFF has one. College football, what do you call it? Everybody has one. ESPN has one. Everybody has one. It's a law now. And of course, I don't really have one. I have what's called my all underappreciated team, which is players that aren't on people's All-American teams, and you'll be seeing that on Nuts and Bolts Sports soon. But I essentially highlight those that have not been highlighted, but for the purposes of our show, I have put together an All-American team, and it is similar to probably some of the ones that other people have, and it's probably somewhat different in places because I am a draft guy. I do look at the guys I think will be the best pros, and I know you're not really supposed to do that with a conventional All-American team, but it always creeps into, even no matter how hard I try, it always creeps into my thinking. But since this was your idea, let's start with you. Who are your All-Americans? And we'll see where we agree and disagree.
Got you. So for some positions, I will have 2 players I selected. Some positions I will have 3, and some positions I'll have 1. Depends on how I was feeling on the day. I like to start by saying I not create a first team and a second team because these players are too good. They should all be combined into one super team of phenomenal athletes. Kicking it off first with the quarterbacks. I selected Bryce Young from Alabama, and I would like to give honorable mentions to Caleb Williams, Heisman winner from USC, and Hendon Hooker, quarterback for the Tennessee Volunteers. For the running backs, I have 3 as well. Bijan Robinson out of Texas, Deuce Vaughn out of Kansas State, and then also Chase Brown out of the University of Illinois. The only player Bill and I agreed that was going to be phenomenal after week number 0. He is just a stud. For my wide receivers, Jordan Addison from USC, Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, and Quentin Johnston from TCU. Tight end, I went with Michael Mayer. Honorable mention to Brock Bowers from Georgia, and also one of my favorite tight ends, my TE number 1 on the NFL draft big board, Dalton Kincaid out of the University of Utah. I was very simple with my offensive line. Peter Skorsky on Northwestern at tackle. Osiris Torrance, guard from Florida. I went Olusegun Oluwatimi, center from Michigan. Cooper Beebe, Kansas State right guard, and Parrish Johnson Jr. from the Ohio State University. Going over to the defensive side of the football, I went with Tyree Wilson, Texas Tech at my defensive end. Jalen Carter, Georgia, for the DT, and the DT number 2 will be Brian Breeze. That'll be followed up by the defensive end. On the other side, I had Miles Murphy from Clemson. Honorable mention to Will Anderson Jr. out of the University of Alabama. For my linebackers, I have Noah Sewell out of the University of Oregon, Drew Sanders out of the University of Arkansas. Cornerback class, very difficult once you get after my first pick of Cam Smith at the University of South Carolina. Because his class is so deep, you could have went with so many different options. I went with Clark Phillips, cornerback out of the University of Utah. I had to finish off my DB room, Antonio Johnson, safety from Texas A&M.
Yeah, we agree on a whole bunch of those. Kincaid was my number 2 tight end. Michael Mayer is my number 3. My number 1 was Brock Bowers, who is not draft eligible. And the distinction with Brock Bowers is that he's a quote unquote modern tight end, right? He's a guy that would have been seen as a tweener just a mere 20 years ago, because I think he's probably going to struggle to get over 240 pounds. He's probably 237 or something like that. And he probably could get up into the low 240s, which is fine nowadays. It would have been more of a problem when people really, really cared about blocking. And now it's seen as like a nifty upgrade if you're a really good blocker, as opposed to something you absolutely, positively had to have. We agree on Caleb Williams. I think everybody on the planet agrees on Caleb Williams. I'm the world's biggest Quentin Griffin guy, so obviously I agree on Quentin Griffin. How could I not? I've been talking about Quentin Griffin for literally a year and a half. And shout out to my man, Matt Hayes, who I bludgeoned over the head about him over the summer. And because everybody was talking about all these other guys like Smith and Jigba, but I was like, no. You know, I'll tell you who the best receiver in college football is. And so, yes, I was, as you know, I love many things. I love my family. I love football. I love God. But what I love right up there with anything else is being right. And so I did get a big thrill out of watching Quentin Johnston have the year that he had. And I was hoping I would not look like a fool, because I was telling everybody who would listen to me, and that's luckily not too many people, but the people who unfortunately find themselves in Twitter spaces with me have been hearing about him since, I don't know, July, June. But yeah, we agree, I think, on almost all but maybe one offensive lineman. So I'll roll through, and then I'll see if there's where we have points of divergence. I think the whole planet talks about Bijan Robinson. Sean Tucker is right there. Blake Corum would probably be about my third team guy. I like him a lot as well, but he's sort of, and then obviously my crush, as you know, is Chase Brown. And Corum and Brown are are right there for me. Bryce Young is the next for me, obviously, after Caleb Williams. And then I would have Dwayne McBride, who I don't think enough people talk about, who I'm also very much in love with. My other receivers are Jordan Addison, who I'm an enormous, giant fan of, and Josh Downs. And then my second team would be guys like Xavier Hutchinson, uh, Isaiah Flowers, as also known as Zay Flowers, and Tank Dell from Houston, who I think people are finally catching up to. And then Rashee Rice would make out sort of my, I guess we have that sort of second/third team. How many receivers you want to put on the field at the same time? But yes, Joe Alt, along with Voorhees, are guys that made my second team. I agree with you on Cyrus Torrance. I have DeJuan Jones over Skoronski. I agree with you on the rest of the offensive linemen. Let's see. Amongst defensive linemen, I had Jonah Tavai. I had oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Give me a second. David Perales is on my second team. I remember my second team really well. It was David Perales. What's his name? The kid from Jose Rodriguez from Eastern Michigan, who I think people finally are catching up to. That guy's going to be a really good, like high-level rotational pass rusher for forever. Well, not forever, but for a while, for a good while in the NFL. Let's see. We agreed on pretty much all the offensive line, but I think the one. And then let's see, who else did I have? I agreed with you on all of Timmy. Oh, Fanishu. That was one of the places where we differed. I had Fanishu as my left tackle, and DeJuan as my right, and then I had Skoronski on my second team. Tuli Telepelotu. Thank you. There we go. Was amongst my. I also had Kalijah Cansey, Akeem Mesidor. Let's see. Who else did I have? I think, is that everybody? Let me see. Who am I forgetting? Well, if it's a three-man front, I guess that's it. But I think we go with an even front. I think I also had. Who am I forgetting? The kid from formerly of Albany transferred, Jared Verse, who's sort of an outside linebacker / defensive end. And once again, it's where you get the whole odd even front discussion. So if you're running like a 3-3-5, he's probably more of an outside linebacker type. But yeah, Jose Ramirez, who once again, if you haven't seen Jose Ramirez, fix that. Absolute animal. Eastern Michigan. And then the other guy who is Thomas Inkum. And once again, he's sort of a tweener. Foskey's really good too, but he's on my second team, along with David Perales and Jadrian Taylor. Okay, I'm gonna give you one other guy to watch, and then Latu. Latu? Is that right? How is his first name pronounced, Brock?
That I have to look up because I forget how. Yes, I know the resident Polynesian needs to.
I shouldn't have put you in that position. I shouldn't have assumed. It's like people assume I know all the black people. It's not fair.
Yeah, so I met a black guy in Detroit one time. Do you know him?
But Jadrian Camo Taylor is my all underappreciated team at least at the FBS level, defensive lineman of the year. I can't understand why people are not talking about this guy more. He is a killing machine. Now, once again, undersized. If somebody was talking about Bill Polian recently, Bill Polian would draft this guy in the first round anyway, despite him only being probably about 6 feet 3/4 and probably about 247 pounds. And you play him at the end. He wouldn't say, because he's basically the same size, maybe even slightly larger than Mathis, probably right between Freeney and Mathis in terms of size. But just, once again, an unstoppable killing machine. He's had some monster games, and I hope he gets invited to the Senior Bowl. I have to check to see if he did or didn't. But I've seen him just take over games. He Had 3 sacks against UNC Charlotte, which I think it just goes by Charlotte now. Total of 11 and a half tackles for loss. 9.5 of those were sacks. And I just think that guy's headed for, once again, a nice long career as a, what do you call that? Rotational. Because of his size, probably a rotational pass rusher. Or a 3-4 guy. And then I think we agreed on safeties. And the only difference amongst the corners is I have Jacorian Bennett, who is one of my draft crushes, along with Clark Phillips. And then if we're going with like a 3 corner situation, then I guess I would probably push Phillips into slot and then have Joey Porter Jr. and what's his name? Joey Porter Jr. and Jacorian Bennett on the outside. But yeah, I think we agreed on. I can't remember who you had for all of your linebackers, but I think we agreed on most of those, except possibly. I think I had one linebacker different from you. I think my linebacker that was different from you was the tackling machine from Navy. Oh boy. I'm blanking on the kid's name now. But I think I had all. Other than that, they were the same. Was it John Marshall? Might have been John Marshall from Navy, and then Drew Sanders is sort of a. If I was going with like a 3-4, he'd be a starter. He'd be a second teamer if I'm not. And then Ivan Pace was my other. And if you're like a 4-2-5, then it's just Pace and Marshall. Or no, just Pace and Herbig. Sorry, Pace and Herbig. If it's a 4-2-5, and then Ramirez, Will Anderson. I think everybody has Will Anderson. Tavai and I guess probably I go with maybe I guess Foskey makes it if I go with the 4-man front, and then it would be. See, this is where it gets weird because there's not that many. I mean, a lot of teams now are either 3-3-5 or 4-2-5. And they'll give you one other guy that I think people are incredibly sleeping on is I don't know if he's coming out or not. He's a 4th-year junior, so he conceivably could. But Vialami Fahoku at San Jose State, wildly slept on, incredibly productive. Once again, one of those 4-eye. He and Scott Matlack are my favorite sort of 3 technique, 4-eye, even 5 technique. Sort of, they could play either of those 3 positions probably at a high level, and no one seems to like them as much as I do. And then quarterbacks, everybody agrees. I think we agreed on all but one receiver. Wait. Yeah, I think that's everything. Oh, did you have a kicker? Did you have a kicker and a punter?
Not at the moment, but it's a good question. Who's your kicker and who's your punter?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Joshua Carty from Stanford, and then Torrey Taylor from Iowa. And then my return guys, Johnny Lang from Arkansas State is like Brian Mitchell level potentially as a return guy. He is just ludicrous. And then amongst my small school guys, I got Jada Byers, Danny Kittner from University of Mary, who was the leading receiver, I think, in every level of college football last year. He had in 11 games, he had 1,728 yards receiving in 11 games. It might have been 10 even. I have to go back and check. But I know it wasn't more than 11. It might have only been 10. But I think he led all levels of football in receiving last year. And then this year he's down like 900 and something, down to 900 something yards receiving. But he really stepped it up in the return game. And that's how he's going to make his living, most likely in the NFL. I also really like a couple other return guys. What is the kid that was a kid that like just kept having? He's also a receiver for Texas Christian. Is it something Davis? Darius Davis is also a terrific return specialist. I mean, terrific return specialist. If you haven't seen him return kicks, I highly recommend it. He's He's terrific at it. He's absolutely terrific as a return guy. So those are some of the guys I would toss out there.
I think that should cover our All-American list. We named a lot of great guys, a lot of potential NFL prospects. Most of these gentlemen are draft eligible. Last guy I want to add real quick, just as an audible mention to the defensive front, is Sione Ika out of Baylor. That's a gentleman I've been in love with for
Oh,
many
yeah.
Had a solid year, even though Baylor had a down year.
Yeah. I completely agree. He is your classic old school space eating, like 0-1 technique. And though those guys may be seen as somewhat, devalued or whatever, there's a place for that enormous man. And he's shockingly quick. Not quite Haloti Ngata level for his size. I mean, Haloti Ngata was sort of once every 15 years. But he's got a tremendous amount of ability to just fire off it. I'll give you one other punt returner because that's what the people want. Kool-Aid, right? Great name. Kool-Aid McKinstry is really good from
Alabama.
From Alabama. I don't think he's draft eligible. He might be. He might be a third-year sophomore. I can't remember if he's a true sophomore or third-year sophomore. But here's the one that's on my all underappreciated team is Eric Garrier from or Garrar, I guess it is, from Louisiana. And he's a corner by trade, and he'll play some corner in the NFL, I guess, as well. But what's going to keep him in camp is his ability to return. Number three in the country in punt return, 15.1 yards per punt return. Just a terrific return specialist. So yeah. Smoke Harris, speaking of great names, is also a pretty good returner as well.
Smoke Harris, what a name! Reminds me of Smoke Monday.
Yes.
Wow.
There's a Cavassier Smoke as well, though it's spelled differently.
The names in college football for the past 7 years have just been phenomenal.
Chef's kiss. I could not agree more.
What these parents are naming their future athletic sons are just. I'm out of words to say. I love it. I started off with Taco Charlton and then just kept going. And then Dakotas Crawford is definitely one of my favorite personally. Kool-Aid McKinstry is up there. Kool-Aid. Like, honestly, there's an MMA fighter in Hawaii named Boston Salmon. So that was an interesting one too. Whoever is naming these kids these things are either destining them for a phenomenal career in athletics or a really tough time in school. Either way, we thank you.
Yes, and maybe a little bit of both. Okay, so let's hit the people with this very important message, and then we will talk about the coaching carousel and then the transfer portal.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so let's do that.
In 2006, we founded Yeti Coolers with a simple mission: build a cooler we use every day if it existed. One that was built for the serious outdoor enthusiasts rather than for mass discount retailers. One that could take the abuse we knew we'd put it through, out in the field and on the water. One that simply wouldn't break. We decided early on that production innovation would come from necessity and first-hand experience, not from market research and data analysis. Today, Yeti products perform when it matters most. Whether that be an excursion into the remote Alaskan wilderness, chasing redfish on the Gold Coast, or just getting together with friends in the backyard, we make gear that helps you stay out longer, travel farther, and live harder.
Enjoy 40% off site-wide. Vitable takes the guesswork out of feeling good. Get your own personalized daily vitamin pack safely delivered to your doorstep every month. Take their online quiz to find out which vitamins and minerals can support your personal needs based on your own diet and lifestyle. Hashtag only what you need, nothing that you don't. All vitamins are manufactured in Australia at the highest quality standard. Ingredients come in the best form for their absorption by your body. Enjoy 40% off site-wide using code NBS40 at checkout.
This commercial is brought to you by TrueBrain. Say hello to TrueBrain. We're not magicians. We're not going to turn you into a rocket scientist, unless you're already a rocket scientist. We're not big pharma, and our products are custom made to boost mental output. We empower people to do their best thinking.
So, as much as you love seeing coaches fired, that always leads eventually to coaches being hired. Now, last time we were together, the big news, of course, was Mr. Showtime himself, Deion Sanders, taking his act, his considerable charisma and charm and ability to lead and attract talented young men all the way from, Jackson, Mississippi, which, while it's not where he's from, it's not super far. He's from the West Coast, the Gold Coast, or some people call it, of Florida, near Fort Myers, and then heading all the way to a very different location, a very different part of the world, where snowboarding is is going on instead of snowbirding, and already he's completely changed a lot of first of all, the recruiting profile has been dramatically altered of Colorado. No offense to anyone who's been there in the past, but they are getting a different kind of athlete, and they're getting more of them, especially sort of high-level guys, 4 and 5 stars, than they've gotten in the last several years. And then we've seen a few other sort of changes in location, changes in Matt Rule, I guess, is one of the other sort of big names. Coach Satterfield, and a few others have sort of changed locations. So I'll start with you. One, with the ones that already have happened, which have been your favorites and which have been the most surprising to you? And then for some of the seats that are still unfilled, who are some of the people that you would put forward as strong candidates?
Great question. I'm going to start off with some of my favorite hires. I got to kick it off with number 1, Luke Fickell, going from Cincinnati to Wisconsin. I think for a long time we felt that Fickell would move unless it was to move back to Ohio State, which clearly isn't happening unless for some reason Ryan Day leaves. Fickell going up to Wisconsin is the perfect fit. Wisconsin's been a recruiting powerhouse for a very long time. The only thing they couldn't recruit was a solid quarterback. We thought it was going to happen with Graham Mertz. It didn't work out with him. They haven't had any success at the quarterback position in a very long time. I mean, I don't care how much you guys are in love with Jack Cohn or Scott Tolzien or any of those guys. It just wasn't the case. You bring in a guy who just sent a quarterback to the league from Cincinnati in Desmond Ridder. You're bringing in a guy that established one of the best TB rooms in all college football with Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant. You're bringing in a guy that has sent a lot of guys to the NFL from a program that was a G5. It's the perfect fit. I think Fickell's going to have a lot of success early, and I'm really happy to went with this option over Jim Leonard because I just don't think Jim Leonard is ready to take that kind of job just yet. Secondly, Ryan Walters to Purdue when Jeff Brom left Purdue to go to Louisville. I was very worried about their program. I think Walters is the perfect fit. You bring in a Big Ten guy to another Big Ten team. He's very smart defensive mind. Was part of the reason why Illinois did a lot better than they. When you have a running offense like they do, you can't surrender a lot of points because then your offense just simply can't keep up. His defense was absolutely phenomenal. This Illinois defense was probably the best defense I've seen them play since probably around 2007, 2008. I'm really excited to see what he does there. Deion Sanders, of course, to Colorado. The amount of talent alone is just you can't even question it. Colorado hasn't had a winning season since like 2014, I believe, and they haven't had back-to-back winning seasons since like the early 2000s. Basically, they haven't done anything since Bill McCartney left. And I think Deion Sanders is the perfect fit for that program. Jimmy Chadwell to Liberty. I felt Chadwell should have went to a bigger job. He did get the opportunity. He should have. Liberty is a program that, well, it just sent Hugh Freeze to Auburn. So obviously they're doing something right. And clearly, even though they are a Christian or a Catholic organization, I believe Christian organization, morality does not really matter at that school, which is perfect because I have no doubt in my mind Chadwell bringing that South Central Carolina flair to Liberty was going to be the right fit needed. J.G. Keeney to Texas State is a major hire. Keeney was the OC at Hawaii when Hawaii went on and beat Houston by 2 scores in the New Mexico Bowl. He was also the OC under Gus Malzahn at UCF before going to Incarnate Wood as head coach, where Incarnate Wood had a phenomenal season, and Lindsey Scott Jr. went absolutely off at the quarterback position. Keeney now goes to Texas State, a program in the state that has some of the best high school recruiting in the world, some of the best transfer portals in the world. I just think it's a perfect fit for a guy that really knows how to call offense. Those are my favorite coaching hires. Some of the hires I don't like. Number one, I got to kick off at Scott Satterfield, Cincinnati. Why? I don't understand what's the point. Yeah, if you're Cincinnati, you're going to another Power 5. You want a coach that can consistently win and win well. Scott Satterfield's last 4 seasons, he's went 8-5, 4-7. That was the COVID year. 7 and then 7-5 this year before losing the bowl game. Is it a time that we've looked at Louisville and said, yeah, they're going to be a powerhouse, or they're going to be a good team this year on the side of the field? I can't say I have. Maybe you've seen it, and maybe let's say something different, but just haven't seen it for me. Troy Taylor at Stanford. Now, I like Troy Taylor. He comes from Sacramento State, really good program. I just felt they should have went with Brett Brennan. I just felt Brennan was a better choice. I'm really interested to see how Troy Taylor is able to do what he does offensively with the lack of weapons Stanford has. Stanford always has $1 million quarterback and $10 receivers. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he does there. Hugh Freeze, Auburn. I don't understand why Hugh Freeze got another shot in the SEC. For the longest time, we've always said Hugh Freeze is never going to return to the SEC. He's got too much baggage on him. And if he was going to return to the SEC, I wouldn't expect it to be at the caliber of job that Auburn is. Lest we forget, like, the only reason Ole Miss was good was because he was paying his players out the behind for them. He can't do that anymore in the days of NIL. Auburn may have money, but it doesn't have the most money. I don't see why that's happening. Let alone the fact that Liberty didn't do anything this year, right? I mean, they were really good under Malik Willis, but then Malik's senior year they weren't that great, and they weren't that great this year. They were all right. I don't understand the hire. Matt Rule to Nebraska, like, yes, he did go 11-3, but he had Charlie Brewer as his quarterback, who became just like a JT Daniels, but less talented. He's just bouncing around all of college football. I don't really understand why people think Matt Rule is going to be the guy to turn this program around. And, you know, I've heard when he was at Baylor, he had this offensive coordinator by the name of Glenn Thomas. And Glenn Thomas went to UNLV, so I got to see his coaching up close and personal, and my Lord, was it bad. And then he went to Arizona State, and it was worse. So that's the guy that Matt Rule trusted to run his offense at Baylor. I don't trust him. I don't like it. And lastly, is Trent Dilfer at UAB. I don't understand how he got that job. He's never coached in college before. It's just nothing about this hire makes any sense, except they're trying to get a name there. UAB needs structure, not spectacular or splash. And those are my 5 worst coaching hires. Before that was my top 5 best hires.
So before we take one quick break and then we bring in our very special guest and friend of the show, I want to find out how you feel about Coach Barry Odom going to, of course, your beloved UNLV Rugged Rebels.
I'm absolutely in love with the hire. Now, no disrespect to his predecessor, Marcus Arroyo, but I lost faith in Coach Arroyo fairly quickly, probably more quickly than other UNLV fans. I think Coach Odom brings that defensive mindset that is crucial to building a program. UNLV is clearly looking to jump to Power 5. That's why they built their practice facility. That's why they don't share. They use Allegiant Stadium, they have their own locker rooms and everything like that. Coach Odom has a great background going from Missouri and then also Arkansas. UNLV really hasn't had a strong defensive coach in a very long time. I think Bobby Hawk is an offensive coordinator, and I think that's the only last time I remember. I think he's offense because his brother's defense. Whatever it was, UNLV hasn't won a bowl game since like 2004. That was under John Robinson. This is the first time in a long time we're bringing in a guy that has that kind of veteran experience. And then also the staff he's building around him is phenomenal. The biggest name of that staff is Bobby Petrino. He's going to be the offensive coordinator. Big things are happening for the Rebels. Love the hire. Great move by the AD. And I'm very excited to see what happens this season.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. My only question is just how strong a recruiter is he, but we'll find out because UNLV shouldn't be the world's hardest place to recruit. I mean, it's in Las Vegas. And as you said, the facilities, especially for where they are compared to the other schools that they'll be facing for the most part, are probably superior. So we're going to learn a lot. We have one quick message, and then, ladies and gentlemen, ships at sea. Everybody, wake up, Grandma. We're about to have something very special for you. A little sweetly Keatley.
All 22 is the future of scouting databases. With over 20,000 players, All 22 allows you to be the GM. All 22, the global scouting network.
Woohoo! Obviously, since it is the 30th of December, no one can catch you now, Josh. You have completely now pulled ahead. You have at one point, Donovan had pulled neck and neck with you, but now with this appearance, and there's no chance he can catch you, at least in 2022, you have secured for yourself the number one spot on the College Football Forecast Friends of the Show rankings. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Keatley, the man himself. So,
well, I appreciate it.
Oh, we appreciate it. Obviously, this is the biggest moment for Ohio State since last year. Which, yeah, I know. These things happen.
Yeah.
So let's walk through very quickly. You have a tremendous just offensive talent all over the place. And we've seen, it's funny because the first time we had you on, we said, hey, Josh, what's the one thing you're really concerned about? You said, oh, I'm not sure about our linebackers. I remember distinctly you saying that. And then later you're like, okay, it's not so bad. And then came the Michigan game. It was like, oh no. Oh, yeah. All of Josh's worst fears fully realized over and over again. And now you're going to be facing a team that is likely to attack you in somewhat a similar fashion. So I'll let Brock ask you questions next. But first, tell me, how do you think the weakest parts of the defense get stronger?
Well, honestly, I think it's just pure health. That unit was pretty beat up. Eichenberg, had a cast on his hand, which I know, Dom Edwards had Eichenberg had 2 casts. Dom Edwards had 1 cast. That's not going to be the case. That's my understanding. So I think that's really going to help. Stuff like that can really kind of get in your head and make you, iffy. And there were a couple plays where you could see where Eichenberg was in the right spot and something slipped by. I really, the defense was bad. Don't get me wrong. But Jim Knowles, his saying always goes is his defense allows for 5 big plays. Well, that's what he allowed, right? The problem is that the 5 big plays were all 5 touchdowns, and they were all 75 yards plus, 50 yards plus, whatever they were. But if you take those 5 plays out, technically he's right. They only allowed like 2.5 yards per play or something pretty insane like that. So it's not like the defense got crushed. But there obviously were issues, like you said, like the linebacker position. Another issue was I don't think that the offense looked great. The running game was not where it needs to be if you're going to beat Georgia. Now, again, I'm hoping that improves with health. I know Travion Henderson is out, but Mayan Williams, as I've said on this show before, he's my number one dude. He's my stud. He's going to be back, fully ready to go. And that was the guy they didn't have. And I'm hoping C.J. Stroud maybe watched some film and understood that, hey, guys are giving you a running lane to pick up 2-3 yards when you need to. I'm not asking him to be a scrambler. I'm not asking him to rush for 100 yards. But their defenses are understanding that he's never, ever, ever going to take it past the line of scrimmage. And you can see that. You can see defenses are just, they don't care because he's not going to run the ball. So I think if you give him, you can get a couple first downs with your legs. I think that's really going to play a role, especially against a strong defensive front like Georgia. I hate to say it. A lot of casual fans say it and harp on it and message me. And I know they're probably messaging CJ, about him not running the ball as much, him needing to run the ball more. But this is not, we're not talking to Justin Fields. We're talking to somebody that just needs to get a couple yards. That's it. And he just, I don't know. It's very odd how he refuses to do that, But I do think that this matchup sets up rather nicely for Ohio State because they do have a lot of speed on the outside at receiver, and I don't think Georgia has seen anything like that. So I don't think Ohio State should be in the playoffs. I was on this show. I said if they lose, they shouldn't be in the playoffs. I stand by that. They should not be in the playoffs. But this honestly does set up nicely because I think that the box score was a little bit worse than it really was in real life against Michigan.
Okay. So you heard it here, folks. He's calling for the upset. No, I'm kidding. I know you didn't really say that.
No, I am, though.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I am.
Yes.
I am.
He's calling for the upset. I love that. Now, one, because it's so incredibly brave of you. And two, because there are places where Georgia is not completely impregnable on defense. I agree. I think people are thinking it's last year's Georgia. Thank God you're not playing last year's Georgia.
Exactly.
Because that would be, the weeping and the sackcloth and the ashes. But this year, if you are able to protect your quarterback, which admittedly is an if, and if you can get something in the run game, right? So for me, the over-under on C.J. Stroud is 38 yards. If you can get 38 yards going forward, right? I think you might be able to do some things. I think you might create some trouble. I'm going to let Brock ask some questions. So, Brock, what questions do you have for the one, the only, number one, friend of the show, Josh Keatley?
Well, since we started the show, I've gotten to know Josh and his opinions very in depth. And I'm still trying to process the quote he said today of our defense did not play that bad against Michigan because my betting slips beg to differ. But going to the question, when it comes to Jim Knowles and that defense, we saw how they got gashed against Michigan, but the big surprise is how they got beat through the air. Do you have that same fear of Georgia being able to do that with Stetson Bennett and Brock Bowers, or because of the lack of receivers that Georgia has, are you more comfortable about this matchup going into the playoffs? Okay,
so and you're 100% correct. Again, I want to reiterate. I was on this show. I stand by. Ohio State does not deserve to be in the playoffs. They're not the best team in the country. There are some real issues, and you saw that against Michigan. But I came away from that game more scared of what the offense put together than what the defense put together. I understand that the defense played pathetic. I am not taking anything away from that. But the reasons that they played pathetic are things that I think that things that are visibly things that they can improve on and were kind of one-offs that you didn't see previously. The reason why they got growth through the air, J.J. McCarthy was throwing it up. Those were not pristine ball. He played great. He played way better than C.J. Stroud. He played like a great quarterback, played like a 5-star quarterback. I'm not taking anything away from his game, but it wasn't like he was ripping dimes, dude. He was throwing it up, and it just so happened that Knowles was bringing the sink, and it didn't work out. The defense to me seemed like Knowles gambled and lost. I don't think he's going to gamble against Georgia because Georgia is more competent. I think that's kind of was the storyline for Michigan is that he was kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this because they can't throw the ball. That was bad. And then those guys, it's funny. I was again before your show, I had Ronnie Hickman as my X factor because he declared for the draft, yada, yada, yada. He played miserable. He was, you want to talk about the linebackers. Hickman was the real liability because he was 100% healthy. He was running his mouth. I was going to declare for the NFL draft and missed tackles left and right. How do you do that? So, that was probably the most concerning part. Another reason why I have a little bit more faith in their defense than I probably should have is I do believe that Sonny Styles is probably going to be the X factor. This is a guy who's 18 years old, reclassified to get into this class. He's an absolute freak of nature. I think it kind of took him a little while to get the bearing straight on defense. But I think you're going to see him now that they have had a whole month to prepare and shove him in the lineup. I think you're going to see him match up on the tight ends. I could be way off because you're talking about a guy who's getting 0 defensive snaps and me predicting him to be the X factor of a college football playoff semifinals. So I could be way off, but that's kind of my Hail Mary. I know that they had the horses that, like I said, the defense, it was bad, but I think it was more like they rolled over rather than they got smashed. Does that make sense? It was more of a we don't want to be out here anymore rather than a hey, we suck.
Wait, is that better or worse, Josh? I'm not sure how to feel about that.
That's a fair question. That's why they don't deserve to be in the playoffs. But now that they're here, I think that if they don't roll over, and that's what I'm saying. I feel like it's pretty easy to teach this team not to roll over. At least it should be. But again, that's going to be kind of on Knowles. We're really going to see what Ryan Day and Knowles are worth because they have talent. They have talent. Georgia's not seen an offense like this. So it's all in front of them. It does lay out nicely. You shouldn't lose to. They have enough talent to beat Georgia. I shouldn't say that they should lose to Georgia because they should, but they have enough talent to make it very, very difficult for Georgia. And then they really, really shouldn't lose to Michigan twice. So we're going to find out a lot about this team, about this coaching staff, and what they can do.
Yeah, I agree. I can't get out of my mind the fact that you said it wasn't like they got smashed; they just rolled over. Isn't this the Michigan game? I mean, isn't this the game that talk about all year long?
I know. Listen, I'll say it again. They do not deserve to be in the college football playoffs because of that performance right there. They do not deserve to be in it. They're not the best team in the country. They didn't play like it the best. That was their one good game. That was their one good game. I was on your show and I said that this is it. This is their one tough game because Notre Dame was not as good as everybody thought. And you sucked. You rolled over. It reminded me of like when I was 10 years old playing pickup basketball against my dad, and he was just body checking me underneath the rim, and there was nothing I could do. Like that's how bad that they just rolled over. So they don't deserve to be in there. But again, you do see, is it better? No. Is it worse? Probably, but morally speaking, but I do think that there is an opening for the talent to overcome that, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, it certainly makes a kind of sense.
Those games. Okay, when I played at Valpo was terrible. Even in high school, we would have games where we'd get our ass beat. And you remember times where you're like, okay, the game's over, we're losing 50-0. All right, it's over. Let's just recoup. And then you think they're going to put in the backups, and they go, Josh, and you're like, shit. And then you put that's the rollover moment. I think that the defense, that's my assumption. They weren't into it. And the funny thing is, too, before the game, I was down on the field. I was looking at the Michigan guys. I was hanging out around the away team. And they didn't seem into it. They did something about the way that they were acting before the game. They were all huddled around Corum. It just seemed like they weren't into it. I really felt really good about Ohio State winning that game because they just were not. They were saying everything they said was just pure, like just them cursing at each other. Like, let's go. And it was like, all right, this is, there wasn't no scheme. It was really weird how they came out because they came out. I remember I was sitting down there with another writer and I was like, where's Michigan at? Are any of these guys going to come out and warm up? They came out really, it was just very odd. I thought, but it ended up that Ohio State was the team that was not mentally tough enough. And that you can see it. They just weren't. They were Michigan, mentally tougher team. They wanted to be there. They wanted to win more. And Ohio State, they wanted to leave. They wanted to leave bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
well, thankfully, Georgia isn't going to challenge them mentally. Thankfully, Georgia is just going to be out there playing finesse ball, so it'll be fine this week. I'm sure you've got a follow-up question, Brock. I can't wait to hear it.
No, I am. I'll be honest with you. I'm having such a fun time on this show, and also I'm just mentally disturbed by what I just heard. What's worse? Ohio State being mentally feeble. Yep. Josh comparing the mental strength of Ohio State to his high school football team, or Josh's father acting like Charles Oakley against a 10-year-old. That's all of this.
I stand by it, dude.
Like, now we know why you were running back, because you were just taking hits as a young man, so you got used to it real early. But that, shout out to Mr. Keatley. That's how you toughen up your son. All right.
So
you're 1980s NBA.
But so you're a gambling man. You know how, like, you see those slots sometimes where you're like, I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but you're like, man, they're either going to beat this, they're either going to win this, I'm going to put money on the money line because they're either going to beat this team outright or they're going to get slaughtered. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to think of a good example.
Oh yeah, no,
you know,
you're absolutely right. That's, Clemson, the year they beat Alabama in the 90, that's exactly how I felt. I put money on Clemson money line because they're either going to pull it off or they're going to get cooked.
Yeah, or Bill, I know you remember those old Minnesota teams with Marion Barber, Lawrence Maroney, and Salik Khalik, the quarterback. It was either feast or famine. Either they were winning by 7 points, squeaking by, or they were getting blown out by 40 points. Ohio State in the Jim Tressel era against Wisconsin was kind of the same way. Either it was going to overtime, and they had to or Purdue, I guess, is a better example. Either it had to be holy Buckeye and 4th and 1, Craig Krenzel throwing it to Michael Jenkins, or they beat them by 40 points. I could see it happen like that. If Ohio State is in the game, they're there. The score's close. Everything is going reasonably well. I think they got a shot to win this, and I would put money on the money line Ohio State to do that. But I wouldn't put money on the spread because if Georgia wins, they're going to slaughter them. Does that make sense? It's either money line or Georgia is how I'm viewing it. If that gives you a better
all or nothing, right? It'll either be right. I got it. And we're joined by so it's all of my favorite co-hosts and our best friend of the show all made it. My co-host of college football, college football forecast is that way. Yes, that way, and then that way is my co-host on Draft Central, ladies and gentlemen. The man himself, the myth, the legend, Jeff Barnes.
The tired.
We just heard Josh explain that we shouldn't be too concerned about what happened in the Michigan game because Ohio State rolled over. So that's how that's the comforting message he has for us. As you analyze the college football playoffs, now that you have that new piece of information, Jeff, does that change your analysis of the game?
No, actually, I'm very concerned about Ohio State because the way they lost the Michigan game, it's not so much that they lost to Michigan. I mean, anything's possible when you're going against a conference powerhouse. However, the fact that they stayed in zero coverage, got beat for a whole half in zero coverage, came back in the second half and said, we're going to stay with zero coverage and got beat some more worries me. Because now you're going to go up against Georgia, all right, who's can run the football on you. And let's face it, Stetson Bennett has improved as a passer to the point where he can throw on almost any defense. So that worries the heck out of me because if they're going to go out there and try to take away the run the same way they did against Michigan, it could be a long evening, I should say, for Ohio State.
Okay, so in fairness to Josh, I've slightly misrepresented, but not very much. So I'm going to bring him in and allow him to deal with the various people sort of snickering and pointing in his direction and allow him to clarify why it is that he truly believes this will be a very close game where Ohio State has a legitimate chance to win.
Well, if it's close, I believe Ohio State has a chance to win. If they're not still in it, I think that it's either going to be Ohio State wins by 3 or Georgia slaughters them by 35. Because like that meant, the mental state we talked about. I understand your concerns, right? They didn't make any defensive adjustments, and that was alarming. But like I said prior, I really do think that Knowles, and this is one of those things where it sounds very lame because as his job as a coordinator is to make adjustments. I feel like he was kind of shocked at what he was seeing. I feel like he was so shocked that J.J. McCarthy was making the plays that he wasn't expecting them to make, that he didn't know what to do. Now, is that a good excuse? No. But again, it's one of those things where we know that Ohio State is better than the score indicated against Michigan. So I'm just trying to figure out why and basically make excuses. That's what I'm doing. I'm making excuses.
Okay.
But you have to, right? Because they're not as bad as what they look, right? They're not. They don't deserve to be in the playoffs. They don't deserve to be in the playoffs. But
yeah. It's like when you show up to a gunfight, it's like, I bet you won't shoot me through the head. Oh, I bet you won't do it again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's put it this way. If the game Ohio State played Michigan tomorrow, and what was the win margin? I can refresh my memory.
Was it 22 to like 25 or something like that?
Okay, yeah.
Let's say,
20, okay, yeah. If the spread is 21, I'll give you 3 touchdowns. Are you taking Michigan?
Yeah.
You're taking Michigan to win by 3 touchdowns?
You just said that Ohio State has the mental strength of a what's the weakest animal in human in nature?
I think that them rolling over like that is not a good thing. Obviously, it never is. But I think that sometimes it was just they got out muscled, they got outplayed, and they don't want to be there. But but things weren't going their way. I think if they replayed that game tomorrow, and heads comes up tails instead, maybe we got a different game on our hands. Michigan's a great team. Michigan was the better team. Michigan is the better team. But they shouldn't have lost that by 3 touchdowns. I'm unloading my bank account. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and expect to be homeless by tomorrow if you're gonna do that. So real quick, welcome Jeff. So we spoke on Twitter before. This is the first time I think I've had a chance to actually speak with you. Welcome, great office. I will need to come down and take all of that for mine. Thank you very much. But more importantly, let's look at Ohio State's 2 biggest games of the season. Michigan, obviously, big game, and then the first game of the season against Notre Dame. What happened to Notre Dame after they lost to Ohio State? They got cooked. They didn't lose. They got cooked at home to Marshall, right? And that's after Ohio State, Notre Dame played Ohio State close. Then, in the biggest game of the year, when all you got to do is defend your home turf, you're favored by 6 points, you have a great offense, you're the number 1 receiver in the country. Bill and I just did an all-American list. You know who's the guy we didn't mention? Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you know why? Because after his big touchdown in the second quarter, he's virtually non-existent. Ohio State has to be some major questions about them, not only about their mental, weakness, but also their offense. Michigan ran a bend but don't break defense, and they literally never broke a single time. Alongside the fact that as the game kept rolling on, Ohio State's offense got worse and worse and worse. Even though we saw moments where C.J. Stroud was able to rip it downfield. So this question goes to you, Josh. What is the issue with Ohio State's offense? Is it C.J. Stroud? Is it the play calling? Is it Ryan Day just not being Urban Meyer? And what do you think is the reason why Ohio State has fallen off offensively against bigger teams?
I thought you said it was a question for Jeff. Why am I getting another question?
No. I didn't say question for Jeff. I just said hello to Jeff.
That's a good question. It's really weird. I feel like Ryan Day kind of gets too cute sometimes. Like I don't know. Like things will be just like you said with the Marvin Harrison Jr. Was that him, or was that them not designing plays to him? Because we saw them designing plays to Emeka Egbuka. We saw them go out of their way to do screens, dinks, and dunks that were directly to Emeka Egbuka because C.J. Stroud would get the ball, immediately look that way. Why was that not happening with Marvin Harrison Jr.? It wasn't like Marvin Harrison Jr. was getting wiped away. It wasn't like he was non-existent. I didn't see him. It wasn't like I saw him not getting open on a consistent basis. It was just like they weren't hitting him or they weren't letting him do his thing. It was just very odd. It's hard not to blame Ryan Day and his play call. I talked a little bit about C.J. Stroud not taking off, but that's the coach's responsibility. Hey, if he's not running for three yards on 3rd and 2, and he does it over and over and over again, that's the coach's problem, right? If you got the best wide receiver in the country, or maybe he's not, but we can all agree he's the top 10 receiver in the country, right? You got the top 10 receiver in the country. You got arguably the best quarterback in the country. You have arguably the best offensive tackle in the country. Dude, make something. What's going on? You have no one else to blame but Ryan Day. Unfortunately, I think he's a great coach. I know that there's a contingent of fans in Ohio State the Ohio State fans that want him fired. That's insane. That's utterly insane. But it's okay to be mad about it. It's okay to to understand that he basically went to the bathroom down his legs. That's what happened, right? Just like the team was mentally soft, I guess his play calling was too, right?
No, but
again, not ideal.
Sorry, I was going to say you bring great points, but you are on the camp of Ryan Day should get fired. I'm on the camp of why the reason to keep Ryan Day for those big college football big college coach extensions that we see. It is an undeniable fact that whenever Ohio State plays in a big game, their offense stalls out 4 times than none. Let's look at the first time they played Clemson. They were rolling down the field the first drive of the game. Then there's this weird kind of penalty and field goal. Second time, rolling, weird kind of field goal. Then they lose, right? Next year, 2020, Big 10 championship game. That Northwestern defense was good. They weren't that good, right? And
No, I
they
feel you.
needed a lot of help. I think it was Trey Sermon that had to go off in the second half just to get them into the playoff. And then in the national championship game, Sermon gets hurt in the first play. Ohio State, they fell out, right? Then we see this year, Northwestern, they held them to 21 points. They don't look good against Notre Dame. They look good against Michigan. Let me ask you this. If they don't look good offensively against Georgia, does that accelerate the timeline on Ryan Day winning a championship, or does that put him on the hot seat in any way possible?
So another game too that you forgot to mention, or it was against Iowa. He doesn't just do that in big games; it's small games too. In Iowa, I remember watching. I believe it was Iowa. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Iowa, or whoever they were playing, it was at home, and they're going into the end zone, and it's like it's first and goal, and they throw a pass. Second and goal, and they throw a pass. Third and goal, and they throw a pass. And I think it was like fourth and goal, and they finally run it to Maya Williams and goes for a touchdown. It's like, dude, what's going on here? Why? It's 1 yard. What's 1 yard? You got a 220-pound back. Do this thing. So he does, and that happened. I think that happened 3 times. With different variations of different the same kind of play calling in that game. Because if you remember, when they went in a half at Iowa, the score was not very appeasing at all. The offense was rolling. The Iowa defense was kind of a bend don't break, like you said. So he does it in pretty much every game. You'll see it Northwestern too, where the wind's 60 miles an hour. Why are we throwing the ball down? What's going on? You're complaining about the win. I hear you. I understand you. But why are you doing what you're doing? Right? We saw it against Penn State. He trying to hammer the ball away. They weren't letting him hammer the ball away. Meanwhile, Marvin Harrison is averaging 10 yards for reception. So it's not just the big games. He does that a lot. It's almost like he's like a kid playing NCAA football where he's calling the same play. I know this works. I know this works. I know this works. And then when it doesn't work, he just goes, which is not great. He's definitely on the hot seat. Because I don't think there's a middle ground, right? There's people that think that he should be fired now. I think that's insane. There's people that are like, no, he's good. It's fine. No big deal. Those people, I think they're also insane. He's lost to Michigan twice. He hasn't been in the conference championship twice in a row now. At Ohio State, which is one of the biggest athletic departments in college football. You know what I mean? With one of the highest paid coaching staffs in college football. I understand we're not talking about the NFL where, it's unrealistic to expect the same thing year in and year out. No, you're talking about college football where there's a huge difference between Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten, right? I mean, maybe not Michigan or Wisconsin. There's a couple in there. But, they're playing Northwestern, Maryland. They should be the expectation that I don't think it's unreasonable to be like, okay, hey, if Ryan Day loses to Michigan again for a third year in a row, he should be out the door. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Will it happen? I don't know. Am I saying it should happen? No, I don't think it's unreasonable for that to be your expectation.
Fair enough. I got one last question before I kick it back to you, Bill. Ohio State offensively has been defined by their running backs, right? Forever. We can go back to the days of Archie Griffin, Eddie George. You can go to the Jim Tressler era, guys like Beanie Wells, or even the Urban Meyer era with Ezekiel Elliott and J.K. Dobbins. Since Ryan Day has taken over, since he's gotten his own recruits, we haven't seen that same type of first round or high second round running back superstar out of his program. What is the reason for that, and do you think he can fix it?
Well, I don't know if that's necessary because if you look at who they're recruiting, Travion Henderson was a 5-star back. He was the number 1 back in the country. He got bumped and bruised with injury. Mike Weber was another guy that was I think was a high-level 4-star recruit. He was or Adidas All-American. And he kind of got bumped and bruised and injured. J.K. Dobbins I think he was a 2-time All-American. So there are, of course, I guess those guys were also recruited by Meyer. But I don't think, I don't think that's Ryan Day. I think that's more of bad luck, I suppose, right? The guy's getting bumped and bruised and hurt and not be able to. Even Maya Williams. Maya Williams is a 3-star recruit. He's good. He's really good. I think that if he went back and did the recruiting ranking, I think if he entered the transfer portal, he'd be more than 3 stars. He's real good. And that's a guy that got picked up right in their backyard. So I think that's more of just, a question of luck. What's going right, what hasn't. Maybe there's some questions in the weight room or what's going on injury wise. I think that's probably where I'd point the finger. Why are these guys getting hurt so often? What's going on? Because at Ohio State, they're not getting the load. They're not getting the carries that they were back in the times with Eddie George, Carlos Snow. They're not getting 20, 30 carries a game. They're splitting it. So why is a guy like Evan Pryor hurt before the season even starts? Why is Maya Williams always hurt? Why is Travion Anderson always hurt? So I'd probably point the finger more towards, their strength and conditioning coach, their strength and conditioning staff.
There we go. Brock loves firing coaches. Let's open it up. So obviously Ohio State is involved in one half of the college football playoffs, and they're the team that they recently had that very important game with will also be involved as they'll
Ohio
be
State's
facing
big brother, the Michigan Wolverines.
Luckily for you, Ryan Dunn is not available. He
I messaged him after the game. I said, "Good win."
Yeah. Okay.
I think that was during his run around his neighborhood singing.
Yes, he was running around the neighborhood.
Yeah, that was the reason for the delay.
Yes, he may still be recovering from the run, but
his liver is most definitely.
But some of the things that we just discussed. Now we're going to talk about, obviously, Texas Christian University, which is seen as a quote-unquote finesse team, which is one of the most disrespectful things you can say about a football team. But it's what people tend to think of when they think of Texas Christian, partially because Sonny Dykes, who is known as one of the great sort of spread them and shred them offensive schemers, their run game is not all their quarterback, but largely quarterback-based in Max Duggan. And then you add on to that that their best player, I think their best player on the whole team is Quentin Johnston, who I think is going to go in the first 25 picks of the NFL draft in a few months. But I'm going to start with Jeff, since this is not a misdirection. This was actually going to Jeff for real this time. Looking at that game, what do you think? Pick like 3 or 4 keys that you think will determine who wins the TCU and Michigan game.
First key is going to be, how does Michigan match up with the speed of TCU? You don't see a lot of teams that fast in the Big Ten, so that's going to be a big challenge, a team that can not only spread the field, but challenge you from sideline to sideline. We've seen when Ohio State's had the opportunity to go up against faster teams, they struggled. They were able to beat Ohio State, so can they match up with the speed of TCU? Can TCU match up with the power of Michigan? Because Michigan is a blunt force trauma team. Yes, they've managed to add in some spread elements and work wide and be able to add in some more things with the passing game. But at the end of the day, they like to grind it out. They like to move the football and impose their will at the line of scrimmage. Can TCU hold up against that? But the main thing is going to be, which team is going to be the one that makes the most mistakes? Because when you have uncommon opponents, there's going to be a lot of things. You're going to have breaks in the game. You're going to have struggles at times. There's going to be a lot of high lows. The team that's going to make the most mistakes is going to be the team that's going to possibly give this game away.
Okay. Got it. I'm going to throw that same question to you, Brock. Yeah. So people always talk about when teams are evenly matched, or sometimes even they're unevenly matched, there's going to be sometimes something that people don't think about that'll end up turning the tide of that game. What comes to your mind?
Well, TCU's run defense is definitely the biggest thing, because I watched them go into Texas, into Austin, and completely shut down Bijan Robinson and Roscoe Johnson for the majority part of that game. And then I saw in the Big 12 championship, Deuce Vaughn went off 26 carries, 130 yards for a TD. They're absolutely unstoppable on the ground. So what run defense shows up for this game is going to be the real key for TCU. On the reverse side, let's see TCU's run defense does show up. Blake Corum is clearly out of the game, so they're going to be relying a lot on Edwards. I believe Donovan Edwards is his name. So let's say that they can't get the ball rolling on the ground. Do they have enough trust in J.J. McCarthy to be able to make those throws again? Like Josh said earlier in the big game against Ohio State, it's not like he was just throwing dimes all across the field. He was throwing some 50-50 balls that Cornelius Johnson decided to be a grown man about and absolutely snatch away from DBs. With that being said, TCU has some ball players on their side that may not be so prone to get exposed. Will McCarthy be able to basically be a proper quarterback if the run game is taken away? And the X factor is, how will the legs of the quarterbacks, both Max Duggan and also J.J. McCarthy, come into play, because those gentlemen can run the ball with great efficiency. And that, to me, those will be the big differences coming in there.
And I wonder if Donovan Edwards, he says his hand injury hasn't limited him, but I wonder if I mean, we live in an age when, thanks to shout out to Peanut Tillman, whenever there's two tacklers, one of them almost always tries to either rake at or punch at the ball. And when you have a hand injury, ball security is going to be quite a challenge. And we're going to talk to a man that obviously knows Michigan quite well. When you look at this game, Josh, obviously your nemesis is now facing a team that you may not know as well. But what are things that you think are possibly exploitable? And then what are some of the strengths that you're expecting Michigan to bring to the table?
I mean, Michigan's got one of the best offensive lines I've seen in person. I mean, all those guys were big, strong, physical, flexible. They were all in the right spot. I mean, as you guys said, Ohio State was trying to bring blitzes from different angles and trying to do different things, and that Michigan offensive line really wasn't giving up much. It's hard for me to envision TCU being able to get a strong enough pass rush to disrupt McCarthy. I think McCarthy has proper time. He can choose. He can make the right decision. He's very athletic. Very, very athletic, and he is not afraid to take off even when there is an open receiver. He'd rather have 10 yards on the ground than 20 yards through the air. And I think that plays right into their hand with how this offensive line can dominate. But that's the biggest thing. That offensive line is just incredible. That Michigan offensive line, and maybe I'm being biased because, like I said, I saw it in person, and they shut down Ohio State, and I've only seen this. Like I said, I've only seen the Big Ten in person this year, so I'm completely 100%. I'm sure there's some bias into that, but that offensive line was very, very, very impressive. I mean, even when they were out warming up, you could tell they were good. They were big. They were strong. They knew what they were doing, and they didn't give up much.
Yeah, as a unit, they're definitely a top 3 offensive line unit, and they've got at least 2 guys who I think are going to have long, successful NFL careers. So hard to argue that. Okay. I have Jeff mentioned the whole mistakes thing, right? And the turnovers, shanked punt,
blown protection.
Right, blown protection. A missed extra point, a chip shot field goal that's missed. Do you think TCU is going to be able to maybe force or luck into enough mistakes to keep the game close? And when it's a close game against TCU, hold on to your butts.
I think TCU could definitely be in this game. I don't. The only way I can see this game getting out of hand is if it happens early. If somehow, some way, TCU can't get going and Michigan is rolling down the field on their first 3 drives, it'll be a challenge for TCU to come back down or 18 down versus Michigan. I think what's going to happen is because Michigan will have the ability then to chew up clock and limit their possessions. So I think TCU has to play the cleaner game of the 2. I think Michigan can get away with a couple of turnovers because when you look at their defense is going to hold up for the most part. They just have to not give up the big play. And we know TCU, with the speed that they have at every position virtually, that's the big thing you got to worry about with them. Making them consistently work down the field is where they're going to make their mistakes. We've seen, the fumbles. We've seen interceptions from time to time on throws over the middle of the field. So I think where you're going to get the ability to make the mistakes, TCU to make those mistakes, is you got to force them to be disciplined and go 10, 12, 15 plays down the field.
Got it. One more question for you, Brock, and then we can all pick on Josh some more. I'm really interested in the one-on-one battle that will be coming, where Quentin Johnston will be facing either, I guess, depending upon alignment and assignment and all that good stuff, at various points, and maybe they'll even move him into the slot, which I don't think I've seen them do much in the past, but they should at least consider it, because, good Lord, because I mean, there's not a slot defender in college football, and probably not that many in the NFL that would really be able to handle Quentin Johnston consistently, in an individual situation. But either Will Johnson or DJ Turner, and DJ Turner had a really good game against Ohio State. But and then I guess German Green, I guess, is probably their slot guy. Or no, it's Mike. what is his name again? Sinistri, I guess is his name, something like that. I guess those guys, and then Green is like a dime back, I guess now. But
I think Sanistril is how you pronounce it.
Sinistro, yes, that's it, yes. So that is the one sort of, to me, decided advantage that TCU has. What ways do you think TCU will try to exploit that advantage, and do you think there's enough there that they can help them to hang around and keep it close?
There is enough there for them to help hang around and keep it close. There's two things that TCU I expect them to use to their advantage offensively. That's the use of RPOs and the use of motion. Anytime you're able to make a defense hesitate, that's the key to any offensive game plan, right? And then when you have a guy like Johnson with his speed, quickness, and not only does he have those athletic attributes, his ball security is just phenomenal too. And it can make the contested catch as well at times. When you have that, you're going to basically run him horizontally all day long, just trying to get him in a place where he can pick up yards after the catch, instead of hitting them with that deep ball over the top. Because realistically, they're going to run a lot of zone coverage. There's going to be zero opportunities for them to beat them over the top. But when you're able to do that, when you're able to shift the defense over to one side, you can use your speed guys and Max Duggan and their running back. I wrote that his name because his name is Keandre Miller. And then you can use them to the other side. With that being said, how is Michigan going to adjust to that? And will TCU be able to adjust to that? I don't know, but I do expect a heavy dose of runs, RPOs, and motions with Johnson to try and get him open various ways across the field. TCU can definitely keep this game close. If they're able to hold up Michigan on first and second down, force them into 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, things of that nature, medium to long yardage third down, that's going to force J.J. McCarthy to try and make plays with his arm. And we all know that can be a double-edged sword at times. He can either kill you or he can absolutely kill your chances at a national championship. It just depends on the day. Almost an athletic Sean Clifford at times is the best way to put him. All I can say is that if TCU allows Michigan to get big yards on the ground early, it's going to be a wrap early. If TCU allows Michigan to get big yards in the air early, I'm not really concerned about that because J.J. McCarthy hasn't shown the consistency to make me that scared of him. But that running game with that offensive line, if you get bullied early over and over and over, your D-line can only take that over and over and over again before the willpower is gonna go away, and basically they're gonna get Ohio State or lose their willpower or just roll over and die or whatever term you want to use. Whatever it is, make them beat you through the air. Do not let them beat you on the ground, because if they do so, then it's over.
Okay. And as promised, we all get to basically dogpile on Josh. No, I'm half kidding. So every team has strengths, every team has weaknesses, but often they're sort of hidden, some that are hidden. What's maybe a hidden weakness or hidden strength and a hidden weakness that Michigan has? So obviously a hidden strength could be something schematic, could be a player. And then same thing with a weakness that you think might pop up in their game versus TCU.
Oh, geez. A hidden strength and a hidden weakness? Man, because they look all strength to me. I think that Donovan Edwards, for some reason, this was the narrative before the Ohio State game, too. Everybody was talking about Blake Corum. Donovan Edwards was good. Donovan Edwards was a guy Ohio State recruited. I think he was a 5-star kid. This guy's good. Yeah, he's got the broken hand, so I think that limits him in the passing game. But I have no issue. I don't know what his rushing total is, but I will definitely be taking a peek at that over. That dude can break, and that's not just because his offensive line is so good. That dude can break tackles. He can move his legs. I like Donovan Edwards, so I think that is a bigger strength than people think. It's always the Blake Corum. Everybody always gravitates towards the Blake Corum storyline, but Donovan Edwards is a grown man. He's good back. There's not going to be a huge jump down, I don't think. A hidden weakness. I don't think that their defensive line was that great. I know that we were on this show. We talked about how effective they were and how they're much. Don't worry, Aiden Hutchinson. Yada yada yada. No, this defensive line, Ohio State's offensive line held him in check pretty well. I didn't think I had an issue with it. I think that's probably the hidden weakness. I think that people expect them. People act like Aiden Hutchinson is still there, and he's not. There's a step down. This was not the Michigan defensive line I remember from last year. So I think that's probably a weakness that no one's really talking about. I don't really know. They still get a lot of cred that probably don't deserve.
Okay, got it. Do anybody else have final questions for Josh before we move on to our final thoughts for the show?
Hey, how come no one mentioned the TCU like destroying every starting quarterback either? Does no one think that luck is going to end a little bit? No one mentioned that they knocked out like 5 starting quarterbacks in a row.
Yeah, they are very good at that. Yes, you are correct.
Because that was when I was filling out my bet sheet. That's the first thing I was like, I don't think this is gonna. There's no way this luck is gonna last, right? You know what I mean? Like, how do you work that into?
They knocked out Texas Tech's starting quarterback. They knocked out
Kansas's
starting quarterback. Did they knock out Oklahoma State's starter too?
I think he still played, but he was down on the ground grimacing, right? But they knocked out Oklahoma's starter.
Yeah,
right?
they did. Yep.
And then they knocked out. They're the ones that knocked out Adrian Martinez.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
I think that there was more, but I think you're right. I think Texas Tech was up there.
You bring up, that's a great point because the backup, I forget his name, but he just transferred to Iowa, so he's not even going to be on the team. So who is Michigan's backup right now? Does anyone know?
Yes. The current Michigan backup is, drum roll please, his name is Warren Davis, and and behind him is Bowman the Showman, right? For those
Alex Bowman, that's right.
Speaking of Texas Tech,
I thought old dude was playing in the. I thought old dude was staying on the roster until the end of the year, before he moved on to Iowa. No,
I don't think he's still on the roster. The person listed as second on the depth chart is Warren Davis, who is from Los Angeles. Suffield Academy and Loyola went to 2 schools because kids do that nowadays. I guess they have a high school transfer portal too. But
pretty much, yeah. As a high school coach, they transfer wherever they think they're going to get the best offer to.
Oh yeah. We see that in Hawaii all the time. Some of our best quarterbacks go to schools in the mainland just to get better offers. That's just how it is.
We had a team captain transfer after the spring game because he thought he was going to get a better offer. We had the better season than they did. So,
that's the flip side. Like sometimes, so when I was a senior in high school, the freshman quarterback was Jaden Delora at my high school. He transferred from Damien to St. Louis. Then obviously he went to Washington State. Now he's at Arizona. So I had 4 schools in 8 years. That's a lot. But it's not even 8 years yet. Jesus, 4 schools in 6 years. That's beside the point. Like Soljay Maiava is the best example for me because he was a Kahuku quarterback, went to like a school in like Maryland or DC, and then eventually made his way to BYU. So it happens. I thought it was a basketball thing, honestly. I thought high school basketball was when you see a bunch of recruiting. No, it turns out it's high school. But a question for you guys: how did Alex Bowman go from the starter at Texas Tech to the third? No. Even if the other guy was still there, he would have been the 4th stringer at Michigan. How does that happen? Like,
he's not a good fit for what they do in Michigan. I was perplexed. I understood him wanting to move on. I just thought he went to the wrong place. Like, what are you doing? Go to Hawaii.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
It's very similar. It's very similar to Shea Patterson. Shea Patterson threw the ball very well at Ole Miss. And then he goes to Michigan and he couldn't throw because all of a sudden he goes to more of a pro-style system that didn't really fit his skills. And all of a sudden you see the downfalls of Shea Patterson. Well, Bowman, I think, was very similar. In the spread, wide open, air raid offense, it fits what he does. It fits his natural skill set. Putting him in a more pro-read offense is not his strong suit.
No.
Wasn't John O'Corn in that room too?
At one point, a couple of years ago.
There was another dude that was like, "Why did you go to Michigan, dude? Like, what's your same kind of backstory?" You know, I think he was like AAC freshman of the year or something.
Yep. He was correct. He was freshman of the year in the American Conference. I think he set freshman record. No, he didn't set freshman records because back in the Kit Klingler, Andre Ware days, the freshman records. But in the post Klingler Ware record,
post run and shoot era.
Right, yeah, no, nobody's breaking those records. But
Astrodome run and shoot era. So not
there you go.
It's in prime condition. So Jeff, you're one of my favorite guys on Twitter. Not anymore because you just brought back my PTSD of Shea Patterson. because I used to follow Michigan football very closely. I was like, Shea Patterson's coming in. We're gonna play Notre Dame on the first week of the season. We're gonna let them up, and it turns out Shea Patterson just had an innate ability to find the turf with every single pass he threw. It was always short, always off time, always made you want to pull your hair out. So that wow, what a dark day for Michigan football. It was so bad for Shea Patterson. They thought Joe Milton was going to be the next coming of Jesus Christ up in Ann Arbor. I think we all know how that worked out.
If we ever do an after dark version of the show, I'll tell you some of the stuff. Well, I'm sure Josh knows some of the other stuff about Shea as well, but we can't do here. So
wait, hold on. Was Patterson a Hugh Freeze recruit?
What was that?
Was Patterson a Hugh Freeze recruit?
He was.
He was right?
original.
I think he was after.
Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah, I guess he was, right? He was a Hugh Freeze recruit originally, right?
Yeah. Well, that would explain.
Yeah. You had him, Metcalf, and Brown all there earlier.
Yep.
And
once again, that'll make an amazing 30 for 30 someday. Final thoughts, gentlemen. Thoughts. I'll start with Jeff, my other co-host. What are your final thoughts, my friend, as we go into this?
I just saw something I had to bring to attention. Thanks to Newey Scruggs from NBC Sports, talking to Sonny Dykes. Interesting Sonny Dykes quote. Now, this is some shade being thrown out, not at his current opponent, but future opponents, because I'm pretty sure they'll match up against some SEC schools. When asked about the health of his team, he says, "We don't have the good fortune to play out of conference games like SEC schools do in week 10 and 11. We're not going to catch the Citadel in week 10. We caught Texas."
All righty.
So he's throwing some shade out there right now.
To be fair, Texas Longhorns today are not that big of a step up from the Citadel football program. Being honest.
Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your various and sundry fire bombs and dogs poop and whatever else to just my co-host, the babyface assassin Brock Vieira. His views do not reflect the view of Team NBS Media or College Football Forecast as a whole. So I'm going to assume that's his final thought. What's your final thought, Josh?
Well, I'm looking at the spreads because I wanted to make sure I was a man of my word. I do plan on taking Ohio State. It looks like the spreads actually changed. I thought that's a very interesting development. It opened up at Georgia favored by 7.5, and it's going down to 6. So maybe maybe they know something that I don't. And then obviously Michigan's favored by 7.5. I still feel like that's probably the right side.
Okay. First of all, my final thought is how much I love doing this. Obviously we've all taken shots at Josh today, and he's good-naturedly taking them all because Josh is an amazing person. Please, if you're not already following Josh on Twitter, what are you doing? Especially if you care at all about Ohio State football or about his amazing analysis that somehow the fact that they gave up gives you hope for the future. I love it. That is a man who knows how to take lemons and turn them into Krugerrands.
That's right.
I love it. I love that turn that frown upside down, Ohio State fans. The fact that
you're glad this is on Twitter because you said Krugerrands and Elon Musk will love you for it.
This is our final show, at least in part because Brock has angered the Texas football nation. So
what are they gonna do? No, seriously. Like if they really had power, they would have had more than one successful season since Mac Brown left. But we don't want to talk about that. Remember, Texas Longhorns fans, this is for you. Y'all suck. Y'all have the best running back room in college football. You have Bijan Robinson, Roscoe Johnson, and Keelan Robinson, and you guys with 8 and 5. Do not tell me your roster isn't good enough to win 10 games this year. All right, we talk about Ohio State not making it to the championship game. Why are we talking about Texas? Stop sucking. Like, good Lord. Like, you have all the money in America, and you guys still can't win. you guys are gonna think Arch Manning is gonna be the next coming of Jesus Christ, and then when he has a 2-interception game, you're gonna burn him at the stake. This is why Texas football is not good, is because you guys have too high expectations for the roster you have, so you go out and do dumb things like you give Steve Sarkisian millions of dollars. Thank you. Whew, I did that much.
Okay, so we did also get a bonus mini rant that I had not planned for. Okay, so on that very strange note, once again, everyone, have a wonderful 2022. Go out with a bang, and an even better 2023. Once again, people who are fans of University of Texas, the views of my co-host Brock Nair in no way represent the views of Team MBS Media or the show College Football Forecast. And once again, we are OUT out.